Thank you. So I came here from Gdańsk, where we have Atlassian office, to talk about web application performance. It's a broad topic, so it's a challenge to squeeze it in 30 minutes, but I'll try to do that. But it will be intense. I hope you're excited. So without further ado, let's crack into it. So imagine this is your application development cycle. We develop something, we work in iterations, we have this continuous integration, continuous deployment ideas. And what I will try to present today is how to add some good practices related to performance testing to learn more about how your app performs. And in the spirit of today's conference, I don't know if you've read the description of conference, it also mentions a lot about a cross-functional communication. So each of these good practice works better if you don't work in silos, but I will also try to mention what roles in your company can work together to achieve the greater results. So let's start with something simple. The first good practice is listen to your customer support. Like, it's kind of obvious. When you start a company, you ship a product, and you don't have any practices around performance testing. Then you won't get for free. Because if you don't know anything about your application performance, your customer will tell you. The bad thing is that usually they won't tell that it's working great and fast. They will rather concentrate on the negative feedback. Another pitfall is that if you're an advanced company, you have many practices around performance testings, then it's easy to forget about this one. And I think this one is very valuable because the reports from real customers show the real problems in the real world. So it's very good to have a great relationship with support engineering teams and product owner who understand that it's important to solve problems of these people, to be mindful that slow up will result in user churn, and you testers support this process. So we tackle the performance problems. Another advantage of good relationship with support is that they can help you as well in the other direction. So when you try to solve performance issue, you can ask them about details of what was the customer data, I cannot reproduce this, what specifics had this customer. Or if you're designing a new feature, you can ask them, you have a lot of field expertise, do you foresee any problems with performance that we can have? Before we go to another practice, I think we can't skip asking a question, but what exactly is this performance? How to measure it? And if you Google the topic, it's scary. There are a lot of metrics that are not necessarily coherent with each other. If you go around your company and ask, for example, a backend developer, he can say, for example, that I've optimized a database query and it's faster by 200 milliseconds. Is that what we're talking about? Or I've simulated a load of 200 users and it works fine for me. So is it okay or not? But when you talk to front-end developer, he can say, no, not mention anything about like concurrent usage. He can say completely different words, like he'll say, the most fancy thing to measure nowadays is time to interactive, or largest contentful paint. So some strange words that might not say anything to you, and that's completely fine. Because it is kind of confusing. But you are testers. You have the empathy for end users. So let's start with that. How about You walk to the customer, you walk to the end user that sits, have a daily work and uses your app. Just sit together with him and say, hey buddy, what's up, what you doing? And he will say, normally that would be an animated GIF, but due to limitations, I will just describe you the GIF. It's, you sit with the user, and for example, this is a Jira product that I'm working on, and you work with him about issue creation. So it presses some button, types data, he has many fields to fill in, he presses OK, and so on. And he tells you, you know, I do a couple of things daily because I'm mostly adding issues to backlog. And yeah, that's how it looks. Me and my colleagues are doing it very frequently. So you can see when he was doing that, and just start a time meter, this is stopper, and see how much time it took to create this issue. And for example, it took like 4 seconds. And that's, I think, kind of important metric. That's like how he perceived the performance. He had a goal, he needed to create an issue. We measure from start until he reaches this goal. And I don't know if you looked a bit similar to you, but if you've heard about like user-based usability testing, it's something that user experience designers do. So it's good to team up with your UX specialist. And if you team up with him and like see the recording, how this user was interacting with your page, you can talk together and say, hey, did you see maybe we present too much data there. There was like 70 fields and he filled only 3 of them. If you don't show it, we don't need to send it to Frontend when you need to take it from database. Maybe it would just quicker if we are more smarter about how much data do we present. Or maybe you've noticed that the UI is confusing and this user spent like a second just thinking where should I click. So sometimes we go too quickly straight to technical details and want to cut some milliseconds out of this code or that code. But you can also cut seconds of this user-perceived metric if you don't forget about it. And in this example of creating issue, I think it was like from years ago, the designer said, hey, if this thing is repeating, many users have such a need that they just want to quickly add issues to backlog. And we've said with PM, with product manager that, yeah, it deserves a new view that will make our users more efficient. And we added in the backlog section just a plus button where you can quickly type presenter and add a lot of issues in a much more efficient way. So this is kind of a thing when you see the solution, it looks obvious that, yeah. But the trick here is to remember about your end user and involve maybe your UX designer also in performance investigations. Maybe you will have some helpful tips that were not obvious and were not that technical. So I've mentioned that we sit with some end user, right? But I hope in your companies you have like millions of end users, right? I hope you get to that range. And it's very hard to sit with all of them. So can we get this data in different way? Yes, we can. There are now tools called real user monitoring and application performance management that allow that. And if you're a cloud company, I'm pretty sure you already have something like observability team, SREs, DevOps, or there's no standard naming of the role that can help you, but generally the observability section. And by working together with them, we can achieve better. So if we are monitoring already our production, why not monitor in the same way staging? So we have a better and quicker feedback. And even if you're not in cloud company, then you're hosting your solution as well, right? For some kind of staging or testing environment, maybe it's worth to start using these tools there to take care of one of your environments, for example, designed for product owners to play with, and also have this tool to tell you a little bit how they perform. So this kind of tools tells you a little bit about how user interacts with the website or client, mobile, browser. The tools I mentioned, good examples are New Relic or Dynatrace, but it's a new sector of software. It's growing rapidly, so there are more at the market, and there will be more. And yeah, it's kind of already a standard in software as a service. If you have a company that delivers in that way, how can you deliver on expected level of service if you don't detect a failure quickly? And these tools helps in that as well, and also in performance. So they also are able to detect the degradation. And really quick, because I know when talking general, it's kind of hard to understand. So just some screenshots, examples of these tools. They can show you how your app behaves, like times. They have a special metrics like AppDex to see how is it good or bad. If it's close to 1, it's good. Otherwise, it's bad. And also how is the load on the application. So how you use it? Well, you can compare something, for example, 2 weeks ago, and if you see that it's, wow, in this week it's twice bad, then you see it's bad, like you got the issue. That's just a basic example. They're also good in catching errors. These tools are really good in generic way of knowing whether there's some errors in your application. But also they can catch JS errors, because this real-time user management also knows about clients, so about browsers. Very nice thing. It also helps a little bit in investigating the stuff, because this kind of software is smart enough to drill down, and when you show it to developer, look, I compared it to last week, and I think we have a problem. Then the developer can drill in and see, oh, yeah, I see it. I see where it is. We changed this recently. I think we're going to work on it. Great. So is it a silver bullet? Is it a great software that solves many problems that everybody should use it? Well, of course not. When you actually work with it for a couple of time, you see drawbacks. So, for example, one catch is these tools show a lot of data to you. There are many, many interesting graphs. But didn't you happen to see in some company that everybody is, wow, that's great, but then after some time, like, nobody is actively using it? So you need to set up a process that is sustainable. And a good tip for it is to just pick a few key actions that you are interested and let these tools monitor that. So when they have alerting as well, if they alert you that something is slower, then you know it's important. So if you go to product owner, he will say, yes, we need to fix that. So in our case, I showed you this create issue. It's possible in this tool to have a custom instrumentation to say, this is the place where you start counting, this is the place where your user is finished with his goal, let's measure that. And that's what I mean by key action. So for Jira, we measure just several key actions like view board, edit issue, add comment, and so In some companies, especially the cloud-based, you add so many custom instrumentalization into your software that they actually go away through this. I will not rely as much on this real-time user monitoring, but they have so many own stats that they use other solutions like StatD and Grafana or Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. Maybe some of you met some nice graphs in your company. Maybe I'll tell a small story. So in my previous company, we have a lot of data like that, and we show these beautiful Grafana graphs. And we were working on the software that is processing a lot of invoices in enterprise companies. So they buy our solution to process a lot of invoices. And we actually had a big screen in Office where we show some of these stats. So, for example, how many invoices were processed globally by all customers using our solution. And whenever it hit some round number, like 10 million, we suddenly stopped working in the office, open champagne, and had a party. So metrics can also be fun. We really do that whenever it reaches a round table. But also it greatly improved like awareness. So if you see that the average processing time of the invoice was lower by 4% than last week, and you see it on a screen in the company, then the managers will talk about it and will see, hey, why it's lower. Maybe it's important to improve it. So it's nice also for visibility. Or maybe last story, we actually had so many metrics that we start to make a business cases out of it. So we were calling to some company and saying, hey, did you know that your competitor is processing invoice twice faster as you? We have data for that. We can offer you consulting and help you streamline your processes. We have all the data. We know, you also know that from Facebook, right? They also have a lot of data from you and they use it. So having a lot of metrics can also be helpful in that. Okay, the other disadvantage is that you don't control the load. Whenever users come in, the load is bigger, maybe your app is slower. So it's very hard to find like smaller regressions using that kind of software. And you test on production, right? So if you catch something, some of your customers already noticed it. So that's not perfect, but it's great that you can catch before you get many customer complaints on your mailbox. So how to make it better? How not to test in production, but code it earlier in our pipeline? Well, let's establish a regression test suite for performance tests, right? And that might sound easy, but it's the hardest good practice that I'm showing here. I've seen a lot of attempts that failed, so it's not easy. You can compare it to like your Selenium automation or end-to-end automation. That's a step harder than that. Why it's hard? Because it needs to be maintainable. Like, want to keep this suite running. Like, you can. I think this the parallel to Selenium test suite is very good. We hate flakiness. We need it to be super robust. It's not that easy to achieve. It needs to be acted upon. So what do you do when your Selenium test fails? Somebody needs to investigate and fix. Either it's a bug fault or a problem in test itself, but it needs to be fixed and made green again, right? And that's the same for regression test suite. That's why if you have this test pyramid, and you should not have too many end-to-end tests, it's even more restrictive to performance regression tests. So we only have a couple of them, only for these key actions that we find that are super important, that we want to catch every commit, any regression that goes there and treat it seriously. I've mentioned a little bit about flakiness. You can see it in Selenium tests as well, but in performance tests, it's even more harder because you also need to have a stable infrastructure, hardware, everything can, there are many factors that can affect the measurements that you're doing. So yeah, it's pretty hard, I won't lie to you. Another requirement for such regression suite is to include also a front-end code. Like I've put here this user journey that I showed before. It's a mix of stuff that is going on a server and on the client. And I don't think nowadays we should omit this client code in our performance testing. Like it's a must to have it because nowadays applications are getting more and more heavy on client side. We push more data there. Some of the regressions might be just because of JavaScript code was changed. So here are some properties. Like for this backend part, it very much depends on the user load. So that's where there are nice tools to testing it, like JMeter, Gatling, K6. What these tools are good at is that simulating user load. Also, if you think about testing API performance, it's also mostly backend. They don't run any browser code. No rendering, no building HTMLs and so on. While on front end, it a little bit depends on like client workstation. It don't depend on load as much because you execute this code in your browser or on your laptop. While even if there is 1,000 concurrent users using your app, the client code is still executed only on your laptop. So the solution to performance suite, like if you want this frontend to be included, let's just take a swarm of real browsers and attack our app and see how it behaves, right? And actually, there are not many solutions on the market that can realize that. I know of two, but we didn't choose any of them. These are paid services, like more modern testing as a service that they will deliver the load to your application and they can take care of hardware and so on and so on. So really promising, but it didn't meet our needs. What we end up with is writing our own solution. I don't want to get into details, but I just want to tell you that we've written our own software. We took a year dedicated team to write it, and we're happy with it. And the basic principle is that it executes a swarm of browsers on our tests, and it has a lot of innovative features. But it's not talk about it. I am happy to talk about it if you meet me backstage. So what about like classic performance tools? I've mentioned this JMeter, Grafana Labs. This K6 is actually a new software. Its marketing title is Lightweight Performance Testing for Developers. It's all in code. It's all in JavaScript. Pretty nice tool. So what with these tools? Are they not good? No, they are great. We use all of them. Just not for this place in the pipeline when we need to have a robust test that we rely on every day or every hour. But we use it in development. What about Chrome developer tools? It's a great tool for performance. You can see many front-end developers at your companies using it, right? Why they can teach you as a testers what they are doing there, what they are looking there. We can teach each other. Another tool in Chrome, Lighthouse. It has a nice performance report. I didn't mention what this time to interactive blah, blah, blah things, but I think many of your front-end developers know these things. You can learn from each other. Code profilers. Many backend developers know what it is and use it at least once. Why not to learn from each other, to be better at your daily work, to know which tools you can use where, and just in the daily work, talk with your dev, say, hey, we're doing this feature, do you think it has a risk that it can decrease the performance? And he'll say, no, it's a simple change, it won't have. Maybe it's true. Let's accept this. But if you agree that, hey, I'm not really sure, I'm not confident if we might cause some regression because I will do a lot of refactoring, I'm not sure. Do you know how to test this performance? And you can help each other and day by day learn more tools. Not only by internal learning, but also you can get a consultant or you know, I'm sure you have a lot of training budget, and I recommend a path of performance testing as well. It's not that difficult. Like I have a workshop internal, just in my company, called Kickstart Your Web Performance Testing. I do it for testers and developers, and it's just 3 times 2 hours, and then they know how to use JMeter, what is it for, and so on. So that's how it started. I just learned how to use the tool. Learn it hard way later on. When you get more experience, you get a little more, and just teaching others to be better. So yeah, I've mentioned that regression suite is a bit difficult, but for development it's a lot easier because you can use this record playback in these tools, and it's cool because you don't need to maintain it forever. You can finish the project and say, I don't think there's a reasonable risk that will affect performance later in the development. It's like it's not worth. So it might be kind of shocking to you that I'm sometimes okay that we use these tools, measure the before change, after change. We say, yes, we did a good job and it's quicker than it was. And then we throw out these tests away. But don't you do that the same with functional testing? Like, if you do exploratory testing, do you automate every path that you went later on? No, you throw away. You like designed some test case, you went through it, and you don't automate every of that because it would be too costly. And it's the same thing. It may be too costly to maintain a large suite. So it's fine to minimize risk in development while the code is still hot, while the risk of introducing degradation is large, and then throw it away. That's it. Thank you. Those are the 5 good practices that I've mentioned. I'm open for any question, and I'll be here for you as well.
So thank you. Thank you, Konrad. We have one question on Slido. Are you using your regression functional test to monitor performance parameters? Are you using your regression functional test to monitor performance parameters?
To monitor performance parameters. That's a great question, because having regression suite opens you so many possibilities. So, for example, hardware recommendation. How do you do like hardware recommendation for your customers? Or you can use your test suite to just change one test parameter, like test your hardware and see how your software behaves. Or is your software scalable? Let's scale the software and see how well it scales. You execute your regression suite and it will give you numbers how well it scales. So yes, we do it a lot, and we actually multiplied from like one test of just run simple regression to like, I can mention like 30 different performance testing types that we sometimes do. Sometimes just one action, just to experiments that we do with different parameters.
Okay, so no more questions. So thank you, Konrad. Thank you very much.